She broke the seal with hands that refused to shake, even as the words inside struck like a blade meant to humiliate, not invite. The parchment whispered as it unfurled, gold ink glinting with ceremonial pride ***, pup ceremony of the crown ***, and beneath it, his name, stamped hard, final, merciless. Her breath caught, sharp and shallow, not because she hadn't expected cruelty from him, but because he had chosen to wrap it in silk and law. She folded the letter once, twice. Her pulse hammered anyway. ***, before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. The chamber waited for her reaction. Stone walls, banners heavy with history, the faint scent of cedar and iron, but she gave it none. Years of standing still under judgment had taught her how to lock pain behind her ribs. She crossed the room and set the invitation beside the hearth, as if it were nothing more than another decree to endure. He had invited her to mock her. The Alpha King had always understood ceremony as a weapon. He would parade his heir beneath the moons, bask in the court's approval, and seat her where every gaze could count what she had failed to give him. The Barren mate. The woman the bond had chosen, and the throne had rejected. She pressed her palm flat to the table, grounding herself. Her name lay there in his hand, formal, distant, carved with rank. Not once did the letter acknowledge the bond that still throbbed between them, the ache that woke her at dawn, and never quite slept. He did not need to mention it. The court would do that for him. A knock sounded. She did not flinch. "Enter," she said, voice steady. The steward bowed low, eyes flicking to the letter before returning to the floor. "Your attendance is expected," he murmured, as if expectation were kindness. "I know." He hesitated. "The seating will be where it always is." She dismissed him with a nod. When the door closed, the silence surged back, thick and familiar. She let herself sit then, spine straight, hands folded, dignity worn like armor she had polished for years. They called her strong for it. They never called him cruel. The bond stirred, an unwelcome thrum beneath her skin, as if sensing his intent across distance and stone. She breathed through it. She had learned how to survive the pull, how to answer it with restraint, how to keep her face calm when the court watched for cracks. The ceremony would be public, political, unforgiving, and she would attend. She rose and moved to the window, looking out across the inner bailey, where preparations had already begun. Banners lifted in the wind. Torches were placed with care. A kingdom rehearsed its joy. "Let them look," she whispered, not in defiance, but resolve. She did not see the shadow move until it was already there, quiet, respectful, undeniably present. "You don't have to go," he said. She turned, heart stumbling at the sound of his voice. He stood near the doorway, tall and composed, eyes a darker shade than the night beyond the walls. Not dressed for court, not dressed for war, dressed as if he belonged wherever he chose to stand. "You shouldn't be here," she replied. And yet, she held his gaze. The bond did not stir for him, not like it did for the king, but something else did. Something steadier, safer, a quiet heat that did not demand, only offered. "They invited you to?" she asked. His mouth curved, not in humor. "No." "Then why?" "Because I won't watch you be cut open for sport." Her chest tightened. She turned away before he could see it. "It's a ceremony. It's a trial." She did not argue. He had always seen through the silk to the blade beneath. "I can endure it," she said. "I know." His voice softened. "That's the problem." The bond flared suddenly sharp, warning, possessive. She stiffened, fingers curling into her skirts. "He knows," she said quietly. "Yes, he planned it, yes." She closed her eyes. The ache surged, then steadied. When she opened them, her reflection stared back calm, composed, unbroken. "I will attend," she said. He stepped closer. "Careful not to touch. Not alone." Her breath caught despite herself. "You can't." "I can. It would start a war." His gaze sharpened. "It would end a lie." The moons rose heavy and bright the night of the ceremony, casting silver across the stone. The court gathered in layers of velvet and judgment. Whispers braided through the air as she entered. Chin lifted, steps measured. They watched for her reaction. They did not expect her escort. A hush fell complete, stunned as he took her arm, not possessive, not claiming, but unmistakably protective. The Alpha Heir of the Northern Reach, long rumored, rarely seen, stood beside her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The Alpha King turned. Their eyes met across the hall, the bonds snapping tight, bright, furious. She did not look away. The ceremony began. At the dais, the heir was presented small, solemn, crowned in silver light. Applause thundered. Approval rolled like a wave. She felt the king's attention like a hand at her throat. When the formalities paused, he rose. "Tonight," the Alpha King announced, voice smooth, "we honor legacy." His gaze slid to her, sharp and deliberate. "And truth." Silence pressed in. The Alpha Heir beside her moved, just enough to be seen. "She belongs under my protection," he said. The hall erupted. The king's hand clenched the arm of his throne, eyes burning as the bonds screamed between them. She stood very still, heart racing, as the truth tore the room apart. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The hall did not breathe. Sound died where the Alpha Heir's words landed, as if the stone itself understood the danger of what had just been claimed. She felt it first in her chest, the sudden tightening, the sharp awareness of every eye turning toward her, measuring, recalculating. Protection was never neutral in a court built on dominance. It was a challenge, a declaration, a threat wrapped in civility. The Alpha King rose slowly. The movement alone silenced what little murmuring dared to begin. Power rolled from him in controlled waves, heavy with command, old as the throne beneath his feet. The bond surged in response, vicious and alive, tugging at her ribs like it wanted to drag her forward whether she willed it or not. She did not move. "Protection," the king repeated, voice even, dangerously calm. His gaze never left her face. "It's not something freely offered in my hall." The Alpha Heir did not release her arm. His grip remained steady, respectful, maddeningly gentle. "Then consider it a courtesy," he replied. "Extended publicly, so it cannot be misinterpreted." A ripple passed through the noble's shock, intrigue, calculation. This was not how alliances were negotiated. This was not how power bowed. She felt the king's attention sharpen, not with rage, but focus. The kind that preceded a strike. "You presume much," the Alpha King said. "I acknowledge what already exists," the heir answered. "You invited her to be displayed. I chose to ensure she would not stand alone." Her pulse thundered. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing into her spine, into her breath. Years of silence had taught her how to endure humiliation, but this was different. This was exposure. This was being seen. "Step away from her," the king commanded. The bond flared hot, possessive, furious. She inhaled slow, controlled and finally spoke. "No." The word cut clean. Every head turned. Even the heir glanced at her then, surprise flickering briefly before he masked it. She stepped forward, just enough to remove herself from both men's shadows. "I am not an object being contested," she said quietly, "nor a weakness to be leveraged for spectacle." The Alpha King's eyes darkened. "You forget yourself." "I remember myself," she replied. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "You invited me here under the guise of ceremony. I accepted under the expectation of dignity." A pause. Sharp. Taut. The air shifted closer again, not touching, but present. A wall without bars. "Careful," the king warned, gaze flicking briefly to him before returning to her. "Every word you speak echoes beyond this night." "I know," she said. That was the truth of it. She had always known. The ceremony resumed only because the court willed it to music restarting in uneasy fragments. Applause offered out of obligation rather than joy. The heir was presented, blessed, acknowledged. Tradition marched forward, even as tension split beneath its feet. She felt the king watching her throughout, the bond tugging, demanding, accusing. It was louder now, agitated by proximity and defiance. She wondered if he felt it too. If the presence of another alpha near what he still considered his made the bond snarl in protest. When the formal rites ended, the court fractured into movement. Nobles approached in cautious clusters, smiles sharpened with curiosity. "You shouldn't have spoken," murmured a duchess as she passed. "But it was impressive." Others said nothing at all, their glances lingering on the heir's nearness, already reshaping rumors. She felt suddenly exhausted. Not weak, never that, but worn by the effort of standing tall when everything pressed to bend her. "Come," the heir said softly, "before this turns uglier." She hesitated only a second before nodding. They moved through the side doors into a quieter corridor, stone cool beneath torchlight. The noise of the hall dulled behind them, replaced by the steady rhythm of their steps. "You didn't have to do that," she said once they were alone. "Yes," he replied simply. "I did." She stopped, turned to face him fully for the first time that night. Up close. His presence was overwhelming, not in the sharp, commanding way of the king, but solid, certain. As if he knew exactly who he was, and had nothing to prove. "This will cost you," she said. "It already has," he answered. "And I am still here." Her throat tightened. She looked away, then back again. "Why?" He studied her for a long moment, eyes searching, weighing truth against consequence. "Because I'm tired of watching powerful men mistake endurance for consent." Something in her chest cracked, not open, not broken, but loosened. Before she could respond, a presence filled the corridor behind them. The bond screamed. "Leave us," the Alpha King ordered. The air did not move. "No." The air thickened, power pressing from both sides. She stood between them, heart pounding, every instinct warning that this was the edge of something dangerous. "This is not your concern," the king said, eyes never leaving hers. "It became my concern the moment you made her pain a public lesson," the heir replied. The king stepped closer. "Go," she said quietly to the heir. He looked at her, conflict flickering, then inclined his head. "I will be close." When he was gone, the silence roared. The Alpha King stopped an arm's length from her. Too close. Always too close. "You humiliated me," he said. She met his gaze. "You invited me to be humiliated." His jaw tightened. The bond surged, hot and desperate. "You belong here." "I belong to myself," she replied. For a heartbeat, something dangerous flashed in his eyes, not anger. He reached out, then stopped himself. And in that hesitation, she understood. He had never rejected her because she was barren. He had rejected her because he was afraid of how much power she held over him. The realization hit like thunder. And somewhere beyond the corridor, the heir waited, unaware that everything was about to change. She did not bow. That alone sent a tremor through the corridor. The Alpha King watched her with narrowed eyes, as if waiting for the instinctive submission the bond had once demanded of her body. It did not come. The air between them thrummed, tight with power and memory, but she remained still, spine straight, chin lifted, pulse loud in her ears. "You should rest," he said at last, voice controlled. "This night has been overstimulating." She recognized the tactic, dismissal dressed as concern. "I will rest when I choose," she replied. The bond surged again, frustrated, aching, desperate to close the space between them. She felt it pull, an invisible thread tightening around her chest, but she held firm. Years of restraint had taught her how to endure longing without surrendering to it. "You forget what you are," he said quietly. Her mouth curved, not in humor, but something sharper. "No, I remember exactly what I am." His gaze flicked briefly to the corridor's end, where the air had disappeared. When it returned to her, something dark and possessive burned there. "You paraded him before me," the king said. "I walked beside someone who chose respect," she answered. "That is not a parade." Silence stretched. "Dangerous. Heavy. You provoke forces you do not understand," he warned. "I understand you," she said softly. "Better than you want me to." The words struck deeper than she intended. She saw it in the way his shoulders tightened, in the way his hand curled slowly at his side, as if resisting the urge to reach for her. "You were mine," he said. The bond flared, bright and painful. "I was your mate," she corrected. "You made me feel like a mistake." For a heartbeat, the mask cracked. Regret flashed across his face raw, unguarded before it vanished beneath practiced control. "I did what was required of a king." She exhaled slowly. "Then you should not be surprised that I learned how to survive without you." Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. The court was still moving, still whispering, still reshaping the story of the night. She knew they would talk of defiance, of scandal, of alliances shifting beneath velvet smiles. "You will stay in the East Wing," the king said abruptly. "Under guard." Her eyes sharpened. "For my safety?" "For the kingdom's," he replied. So that was it. Not concern containment. "I will not be imprisoned," she said. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You are already bound." The bond tightened, throbbing, demanding acknowledgement. She felt the pull of it like a second heartbeat, familiar, maddening, intimate. She hated how easily it could still unravel her. "You cannot command what you refuse to cherish," she said. The words hung between them like a challenge. For a moment, she thought he might roar, might grab her wrist, might let the alpha loose. Instead, he smiled. It chilled her. "You have always been eloquent," he said. "That is what makes you dangerous." He turned away, cloak sweeping behind him. "See that she is escorted," he ordered the shadows. Guards emerged, respectful but unmistakably present. She did not fight them. She walked with her head high, every step measured, even as anger and grief twisted together beneath her ribs. The East Wing loomed ahead, quiet, guarded, too far from the halls she knew. When the doors closed behind her, the silence pressed in. She crossed the room slowly, letting the weight of the night settle. Her hands trembled only once before she clenched them into fists. A soft knock sounded. Her heart jumped. She opened the door to find the heir standing there, expression taut with restraint. Relief flickered across his face when he saw her upright, unbroken. "They moved you," he said. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "I warned him." She shook her head. "This was always coming." He stepped inside, closing the door carefully behind him. The room seemed smaller with him, in it charged with unspoken words. "I won't let him cage you," he said. She met his gaze. "You don't get to decide that. A beat. Then respect." He inclined his head. "You're right." The bond stirred faintly at the edges of her awareness, not reacting to him, but to the fact that someone had listened. "Why are you really here?" she asked. He hesitated, then reached into his coat and withdrew a sealed document. "Because the court doesn't yet know what I am," she frowned. "They announced you as heir. They announced what suited them." He met her eyes. "Not who I'm bound to." Her breath caught. "You?" she whispered. "Yes." The word landed heavy, reverberating through her chest. "I am not just an ally," he continued. "I am part of what he's afraid of." The bond between her and the king pulsed violently, as if sensing the truth drawing nearer. Outside the door, footsteps paused. The air stiffened. "Someone's listening," he murmured. The handle turned, and the night fractured, poised on the edge of revelation. The handle turned a fraction. She moved without thinking. Her hand caught the heir's wrist and pulled him back just as the door opened, her body angling instinctively between him and the threshold. The motion was fluid, practice not submission, but protection born of years surviving sharp rooms and sharper politics. A guard stood there, posture rigid, eyes carefully blank. "My lady," he said, "the king requests your presence." The bond surged violently, hot and commanding, as if summoned by the words alone. She forced her breathing steady and met the guard's gaze. "At this hour?" she asked. "Yes." She felt the air's pulse beneath her fingers fast, controlled. He leaned close, voice low enough that only she could hear. "This is not a request." "I know." She released him and turned back to the guard. "I will come." The guard hesitated, then added, "Alone." Her jaw tightened. "No," she said calmly. The guard blinked, not at the refusal but at the certainty with which it was delivered. "The Alpha King was clear," he insisted. "So am I." She stepped forward, forcing the issue. "You may escort me. You may announce me. You may even stand outside the door. But I will not be isolated to satisfy his temper." A beat passed, then another. Behind her, the air remained silent present, steady, letting her lead. The guard finally inclined his head. "As you wish, my lady." The corridors were quieter now, the revelry reduced to distant echoes. Torches flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to lean closer as she walked. The bond tugged with every step, guiding her unerringly toward him. She hated that part of it. The doors to the king's private chamber opened without ceremony. He stood near the hearth, crown discarded, sleeves rolled back as if he were a man rather than a ruler. The sight struck her harder than she expected, raw, intimate, dangerous. This was the version of him the court never saw, the one she had once loved. The air halted at the threshold. "You will wait outside," the king said without turning. "No," the air replied evenly. Power slammed into the room. The flames in the hearth flared high, responding to the Alpha's dominance. The bond screamed, bright and overwhelming, dragging heat through her veins. "Enough," she said sharply. Both men stilled. She stepped fully into the room, shoulders back, gaze unwavering. "If you summon me to remind me of my place, you've already failed." The king turned then, eyes blazing. "You test me." "I endure you," she corrected. For a moment they stood locked in a silence so thick it felt alive. Then the king exhaled, slow and deliberate, forcing control back into his posture. "Leave us," he said to the air again, quieter this time. She glanced back. The air searched her face, conflict etched deep. "I'll be right outside," he said. She nodded once. When the door closed, The bond surged like a living thing unleashed. You brought him here to wound me, the king said. I brought no one, she replied. You invited the wound. His hand flexed. You humiliated the throne. No, she said softly. I exposed it. The words hit home. She saw it in the way his gaze flickered, the way his breath changed. You think he protects you, he said. But he wants what is mine. She laughed once bitter. You cannot lose what you never claimed. The bond flared painfully at that sharp, pleading, furious. He took a step toward her before stopping himself, jaw clenched. I claimed you the moment fate bound us, he said. And then you spent years proving the bond meant less to you than perception. Silence cracked. His voice dropped. Do you know what it costs a kingdom when its queen cannot produce an heir? Her chest tightened, old pain resurfacing like a bruise pressed too hard. Do you know what it costs a woman when her worth is reduced to her womb? Something broke in his expression. I never said you were worthless, he snapped. You never had to, she replied. The fire popped loudly. Sparks leapt. You should not trust him, the king said after a long moment. He is not what he appears. Her gaze sharpened. Neither are you. His eyes darkened. He is bound to a force older than this crown. Her breath caught. What force? Before he could answer, the bond twisted violently, not toward him, but outward, away, as if something had awakened. A shout echoed from the corridor. Steel rang. The king's head snapped up. What is that? She was already moving. She yanked open the door to Chaos Guard stumbling back, the air standing between them and the hall, eyes blazing with contained power. The air around him shimmered, ancient and unmistakable. Stay behind me, he said. The king stepped forward, recognition flashing across his face. So, he murmured. It's true. The air did not look away from her. Now you understand why you're afraid. The power surged, and the bond screamed not in possession, but warning, because the heir's secret was no longer contained, and neither was the future. The corridor erupted. Guards stumbled back as if pushed by an unseen force, boots scraping stone, weapons half-drawn, and instantly useless. The air itself seemed to bend around the Alpha Heir, shimmering with a pressure that made breathing feel like resistance rather than instinct. She stood frozen for half a heartbeat, then instinct won. Stop, she said. The word cut through the chaos. Not shouted, not commanded, spoken. The power hesitated. The air turned his head slightly, eyes flicking to her face. In them burned something ancient, restrained by will alone. The pressure eased, just enough that the guards regained their footing, confusion rippling through their ranks. The Alpha King watched in silence, awe and fury twisting together behind his gaze. It answers you, he said quietly. She swallowed. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange, unsettling certainty. I didn't summon it. No, the heir said. You didn't have to. The words settled heavy between them. The bond screamed again, angrier now, frantic, as if sensing that something fundamental was shifting beyond its control. She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying herself as the ache sharpened into something close to panic. What are you? The king demanded. The air straightened, power pulling in tighter around him. Contained but unmistakable. The truth you buried. A murmur rose among the guards, fear, recognition, rumor colliding. The Northern Reach has no throne, the king said slowly. Only legends, and legends endure, the heir replied, because they are bound to something real. She looked between them, understanding dawning in pieces that refused to fit neatly together. You knew, she whispered to the king. You've always known. His jaw tightened. I suspected, and still you invited me, she said. Still you chose to make me a spectacle. His silence answered her. Something inside her hardened, not into bitterness, but resolve. Enough, she said again. Both alphas turned toward her. She took a step forward, placing herself between them despite every instinct screaming that she was stepping into the path of something catastrophic. This ends now, not with dominance, not with fear. Her voice trembled only slightly. You will not tear the kingdom apart, because neither of you can tolerate losing control. The heir's power pulled back further, responding instantly. Respect. Trust. The bond, however, fought viciously. The king reached for her, stopping just short of contact. You don't understand what he represents. I understand what you've done, she replied. And what it cost. Pain flickered across his face, quick and real. You were never weak, he said. You were dangerous, and I was afraid that loving you would unmake me. The confession struck harder than any insult ever had. Her breath caught, the bond surged, aching with old want, old nights of waiting, old hope crushed beneath duty and pride. You don't get to confess now, she said softly. Not after you taught me how to survive without your love. Silence fell thick, reverent, final. The heir stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel his presence like an anchor. This night will be remembered, he said. The court will demand answers. They will, the king agreed, voice hoarse. And they will choose sides. Her stomach tightened. Politics, power, war, it all loomed, vast and merciless. Then hear mine, she said. Both men turned fully toward her. I will not be hidden, she continued. I will not be paraded, and I will not be claimed by fear or tradition. She lifted her chin. If the kingdom is to survive what comes next, it will be because I stand where I choose. The heir inclined his head first. The king followed slowly, reluctantly. Somewhere in the distance, bells began to ring an alarm, a summons, or the first echo of upheaval. She closed her eyes for one brief moment, feeling the weight of destiny settle, not as a chain, but a mantle. When she opened them, the future was no longer waiting. It was moving toward her. The bells did not stop. They rang with a rhythm meant to summon judgment, measured, relentless, echoing through every corridor and chamber of the stronghold. She felt each toll in her bones, as if the castle itself were calling witnesses. Counsel, the Alpha King said grimly. They will not wait. They never do, she replied. Guards moved quickly now, less certain, eyes darting between the king and the heir, as if unsure which authority demanded obedience. The heir remained close, a quiet presence at her shoulder, his power drawn tight but unmistakable, like a blade sheathed only because she asked it to be. The council chamber filled fast. Nobles took their seats with forced composure, whispers snapping shut as she entered. They looked at her differently now, not with pity, not with idle disdain, but calculation. The woman who had been displayed was no longer convenient. She took her place without waiting to be directed. Murmur followed. The Alpha King sat opposite her, expression carved from stone. To his right, advisors shifted uneasily. To her left, the heir stood rather than sat, a deliberate choice that did not go unnoticed. The events of this evening, the king began, have created confusion. Truth tends to, she said. Gasps flickered through the chamber. The king's gaze sharpened, but he did not interrupt. A claim was made, one of the elders said carefully, eyes fixed on the heir. A claim of protection. Yes, the heir answered, and I stand by it. Protection. The word rippled again, dangerous, provocative. She felt the weight of it press into her back, not as a burden, but a shield she had never been offered before. Protection implies weakness. Another noble sneered. She turned toward him. Only to those who rule by fear. Silence slammed down. The elder cleared his throat. You were summoned, my lady, because your presence has become politically significant. She almost smiled. It always was. The Alpha King leaned forward. This council exists to preserve stability. And I exist to be sacrificed for it. She asked quietly. The bond pulsed painfully between them. He flinched just once. No, he said. You exist because fate bound us. And you chose to punish me for it, she replied. The chamber held its breath. The heir spoke then, voice steady, resonant. The bond is not ownership, nor is it authority. It is responsibility. A stir ran through the council. You speak boldly for one whose status remains. Undefined, an elder said. The heir met his gaze. Then define it. She felt the shift before it happened, the tightening of alliances, the subtle leaning forward of those who sensed opportunity. Power always revealed the ambitious. The Alpha King exhaled slowly. If you are what the legends claim, he said to the heir, then your interest in her threatens every treaty we hold. Only the dishonest ones, the heir replied. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the growing awareness that she was no longer the quiet variable in someone else's equation. She was the pivot. I will speak plainly, she said. All eyes turned to her. You may debate my worth. You may fear my presence. But you will no longer decide my fate without my voice. She rose, the movement smooth, unhurried. I will not be hidden in wings or trotted out for ceremony. If this kingdom demands my silence to survive, then it does not deserve my loyalty. The words cut clean, undeniable. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then unexpectedly one of the elders bowed his head. Perhaps, he said slowly, we have mistaken endurance for submission. Something loosened in her chest. The Alpha King watched her, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Regret, admiration, loss. This council will adjourn, he said finally. We will reconvene at dawn. The decision was strategic. Delay. Time to maneuver. As the chamber emptied, the heir leaned close, voice low. They are afraid of you. She swallowed. They should be. They exited together into the dim corridor, the weight of what had been said trailing behind them like a living thing. You stood your ground, he said. So did you. Their gazes met charge, restrained, intimate in a way that made her breath hitch. Not desire yet. Something slower. Something more dangerous. Behind them, from the council chamber's shadowed doorway, the Alpha King watched. And for the first time, he understood. He was no longer the one shaping her future. She was. Night reclaimed the stronghold inch by inch. Torches dimmed. Doors closed. Whispers retreated into stone. Yet the tension she carried did not ease, it sharpened, honed by what had been said and what had not. Her chambers were different now. Not larger, not finer, but guarded. She felt it the moment she crossed the threshold. The subtle shift of presence, the quiet awareness that her safety had become a matter of state rather than courtesy. It should have angered her. Instead, it steadied her spine. You don't have to stay, she said, setting her palms on the table as if to anchor herself to the room. I know, the heir replied. He remained by the door, giving her space, as if proximity itself required permission. That restraint chosen, deliberate, pressed against her far more than command ever had. The council will move against you, she continued. Against us. They already are, she turned. His expression was calm, but something restless lived beneath it. A current held back by discipline alone. You're not afraid, she said. No. He paused. But I am careful. Her mouth curved faintly. You should be. The bond stirred at the edges of her awareness, resentful, watchful, reacting to his presence without answering it. She hated how loudly it reminded her of what she had endured. She hated how quiet it fell when she chose not to listen. "They will test you next," he said. Subtly, invitations, honors, traps dressed as courtesies. "I know their language." "Yes," he said softly. "You do." The way he said it, without judgment, without condescension, sent a tremor through her. Being seen was not a new sensation. Being understood was. "You should leave before they notice how often you're here," she said. "I'm not here for them." The words settled between them, intimate without being improper, heavy with intention. She took a slow breath. "Then why are you here?" He did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low, measured. "Because when you speak, power listens. And I have spent my life guarding a force that recognizes the same truth." Her pulse quickened. "That doesn't explain the way you look at me." A beat. Then honesty. "Because you refuse to kneel," he said. "And because you endure without becoming cruel." The words struck deeper than flattery ever could. She stepped closer before she could stop herself one pace, no more. The air tightened instantly, charged with awareness. Not hunger, not yet. Something slower, more dangerous. "Careful," she murmured. His breath changed. "I am." They stood there, close enough to feel warmth, far enough that restraint still held. Every silence pressed like a question neither dared to answer. A knock shattered it. Both of them stilled. The bond flared sharp warning. She opened the door to find a messenger, eyes downcast. "My lady, the Alpha King requests a private audience immediately." Her chest tightened. "No," she said. The messenger blinked. "He insists. Then he will learn patience." She closed the door without waiting for reply. The air watched her, something like admiration flickering across his face. "That was unwise." "Perhaps," she said, "but necessary." Another knock came harder this time. Her jaw set. "He won't stop." "No," the air agreed. "He's losing you." The truth of it landed with quiet force. She crossed the room, stopping a breath away from him. "If I choose a different future," she said, voice low, "it will not be to wound him." "I know," he replied. "It will be because you finally choose yourself." The bond pulsed, angry, aching, afraid. Outside the door, the knocking ceased. Silence returned thick, watchful. She met the air's gaze, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "Stay," she said. Not a command, a request. He did not touch her, but he stayed. And somewhere beyond stone and shadow, a king realized restraint was no longer his to enforce. The silence did not last. It never did. She sensed the shift before any sound reached her, the subtle tightening of the air, the way the bond drew taut like a wire pulled too far. Somewhere beyond her chamber walls, power moved with intention. "They're not finished," she said quietly. The air straightened near the window, eyes narrowing as if he could see through stone. "No, this is where they begin to bargain." A horn sounded in the distance. Low, deliberate. Her pulse spiked. "That's not ceremonial." "No," he agreed. "It's a summons." Another knock came, no courtesy this time. The door opened at once, admitting 2 guards and a council aide, whose expression was carefully neutral. "My lady," the aide said, "the council has reconvened. There has been new information." She felt the bond react instantly, sharp and possessive. Anger flared not at the king, but at the instinct that still tried to cage her choices. "I was not informed," she replied. "The Alpha King ordered it." The heir stepped forward. Then he oversteps. The aide's gaze flicked to him, then away. Your presence is contested. She lifted her chin. Then so is theirs. She moved past them without waiting for permission. The air fell into step beside her, close enough that she felt steadied rather than overshadowed. The council chamber felt colder than before. Nobles stood rather than sat, forming quiet factions that sharpened the moment she entered. At the chamber's center, the Alpha King waited, expression unreadable, posture rigid with control. You act with remarkable independence, he said. I learned from watching you, she replied. A few murmurs escaped before being silenced. The council has raised concerns, an elder announced, regarding your influence and your proximity to forces that threaten equilibrium. She understood immediately. Not fear of the heir, fear of her. Say it plainly, she said. The elder hesitated. There are whispers questioning your fertility. The words struck hard, still sharp, even after years. They suggest, he continued, that if the bond were severed, the kingdom might stabilize. The bond screamed. The Alpha King's head snapped up. No, the chamber froze. She stared at him, stunned not by the refusal, but by the raw edge in it. You will not debate her worth like livestock, he growled. Not again. Her breath caught. Pain and something dangerously close to gratitude collided in her chest. And yet, she said softly, you let them do it for years. Silence crushed down. The air moved, then stepping forward. Power stirring like a storm held just beneath the skin. You speak of severing bonds you do not understand, he said. Do you know what it costs? The elders stiffened. It would fracture more than a union, he continued. It would expose every lie this court has built its authority on. The Alpha King's gaze locked on her. Is that what you want? He asked quietly. To tear it all down? She searched his face. The man who had rejected her, feared her, loved her in silence and punished her for it. No, she said at last. I want the truth acknowledged. And if the truth destabilizes the throne? An elder pressed. Then perhaps the throne was already unstable, she replied. A sharp intake of breath swept the room. The king closed his eyes briefly, as if weighing something heavy and final. When he opened them, his voice was low, resolute. The bond will not be severed. Shock rippled outward. But, he continued, neither will it be used as a chain. He turned to her fully. I will no longer compel your presence. Your choices will be your own. The words rang like a verdict. Her heart pounded. Freedom, real freedom, hovered within reach, terrifying in its immediacy. And the court? She asked. They will adapt, he said. Or be revealed. The heir inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the shift. As the council dissolved into uneasy murmurs, she felt the cost of staying settled into her bones. Not safety, not comfort. Change. Outside the chamber, the heir spoke quietly. That was a line you cannot uncross. I know, she said. And yet you crossed it anyway. She met his gaze. Because staying silent was killing me. Something fierce and approving lit his eyes. Behind them, unseen by either, a figure slipped away, already carrying word to those who would not accept the new order. The price of staying had been named, and it would be collected. Morning came without mercy. Sunlight spilled across the stronghold, bright and unforgiving, as if the world itself refused to soften what the night had set in motion. She stood at the window of her chambers, watching the courtyard below fill with movement, messengers running, banners shifting, guards changing routes. They were preparing for something. You didn't sleep, the heir said quietly behind her. I didn't need to, she replied. The bond had kept her awake, restless, sharp, unsettled by the king's declaration and the court's thinly veiled outrage. Freedom had a taste. So did consequence. A soft knock interrupted them. This time, the visitor smiled. "My lady," Lady Marith said, stepping inside with practiced warmth. One of the most influential women in court, elegant, gracious, and deadly in the way only the favored could afford to be. "I came to offer my support." The heir's posture shifted subtly. She inclined her head. "Support rarely arrives unannounced." Marith laughed lightly. "Forgive me. Old habits." Her gaze slid to the heir. "You have stirred the kingdom." "He's not the only one," she replied. Marith's smile tightened, just a fraction. "The council fears chaos. They believe compromise may yet preserve unity." "Compromise," she repeated. "For whom?" "For you," Marith said gently. "A new arrangement. Public distance from the heir. Private reconciliation with the king." The bond surged, hopeful, aching, treacherous. She felt it and despised it. "And what would I receive in return?" she asked. "Respect," Marith said. "Stability. A voice within limits." The heir did not interrupt. He waited. She studied Marith's face, the kindness sharpened by calculation. "You're asking me to disappear politely." "I'm asking you to survive," Marith corrected. She stepped closer. "I survived long before you offered me terms." The smile never wavered. "Then consider this insurance." A servant entered abruptly, bowing low. "My lady, there has been an incident." Her heart lurched. "What kind of incident?" "The Western Gate," he said. "A confrontation." Blood was spilled. The air stiffened. "Who?" The servant swallowed. "Supporters of your position." The words hit hard. Marith's gaze sharpened with something like satisfaction. "You see? Already people are choosing sides." Anger flared clean, controlled. "You orchestrated this." Marith sighed. "I prevented worse." "No," she said coldly. "You created fear to sell obedience." The air moved then, power stirring dangerously. "Careful." Marith finally looked uneasy. "You would risk open fracture." She met her gaze without blinking. "I will not buy peace with silence." Marith's smile vanished. "Then you leave us no choice." She turned to go, then stopped as guards filled the doorway. "For your protection," Marith said softly. The bond screamed. The heir stepped in front of her instantly. "Touch her," he warned, "and you will learn what legends are made of." Steel rang. From the corridor beyond, the Alpha King's voice thundered, "Stand down." He strode in, eyes blazing, taking in the scene in a single breath. His gaze locked on Marith. "You moved without my order," he said. Marith bowed, too quickly. "I acted for the realm." "For yourself," the king snapped. "Get out." The guards hesitated, then withdrew. Marith straightened, eyes cold now. "This isn't over." When she was gone, the silence felt raw. The king turned to her. "They will come for you again." "I know," she said. His voice lowered. "Then you must choose." The bond pulsed, desperate. The heir watched her, not pleading, not demanding. She drew a steady breath. "I already have," she said. And somewhere deep within the court, the first true betrayal settled its roots. *** Chapter 9. The betrayal that wears a smile *** morning came without mercy. Sunlight spilled across the stronghold, bright and unforgiving, as if the world itself refused to soften what the night had set in motion. She stood at the window of her chambers, watching the courtyard below fill with movement, messengers running, banners shifting, guards changing routes. They were preparing for something. "You didn't sleep," the heir said quietly behind her. "I didn't need to," she replied. The bond had kept her awake, restless, sharp, unsettled by the king's declaration and the court's thinly veiled outrage. Freedom had a taste. So did consequence. A soft knock interrupted them. This time, the visitor smiled. "My lady," Lady Mareth said, stepping inside with practiced warmth. One of the most influential women in court, elegant, gracious, and deadly in the way only the favored could afford to be. "I came to offer my support." The heir's posture shifted subtly. She inclined her head. Support rarely arrives unannounced. Mareth laughed lightly. "Forgive me. Old habits." Her gaze slid to the heir. "You have stirred the kingdom." "He's not the only one," she replied. Mareth's smile tightened. "Just a fraction. The council fears chaos. They believe compromise may yet preserve unity." "Compromise," she repeated. "For whom?" "For you," Mareth said gently. "A new arrangement. Public distance from the heir. Private reconciliation with the king." The bond surged, hopeful, aching, treacherous. She felt it and despised it. "And what would I receive in return?" she asked. "Respect," Mareth said. "Stability. A voice within limits." The heir did not interrupt. He waited. She studied Mareth's face, the kindness sharpened by calculation. "You're asking me to disappear politely." "I'm asking you to survive," Mareth corrected. She stepped closer. "I survived long before you offered me terms." The smile never wavered. "Then consider this insurance." The servant entered abruptly, bowing low. "My lady, there has been an incident." Her heart lurched. "What kind of incident?" "The Western Gate," he said. "A confrontation. Blood was spilled." The heir stiffened. "Who?" The servant swallowed. "Supporters of your position." The words hit hard. Mareth's gaze sharpened with something like satisfaction. "You see? Already people are choosing sides." Anger flared clean, controlled. "You orchestrated this." Mareth sighed. "I prevented worse." "No," she said coldly. "You created fear to sell obedience." The air moved then, power stirring dangerously. "Careful." Mareth finally looked uneasy. "You would risk open fracture." She met her gaze without blinking. "I will not buy peace with silence." Mareth's smile vanished. "Then you leave us no choice." She turned to go, then stopped as guards filled the doorway. "For your protection," Mareth said softly. The bond screamed. The heir stepped in front of her instantly. "Touch her," he warned, "and you will learn what legends are made of." Steel rang. From the corridor beyond, the Alpha King's voice thundered. "Stand down." He strode in, eyes blazing, taking in the scene in a single breath. His gaze locked on Mareth. "You moved without my order," he said. Mareth bowed too quickly. "I acted for the realm." "For yourself," the king snapped. "Get out." The guards hesitated, then withdrew. Mareth straightened, eyes cold now. "This isn't over." When she was gone, the silence felt raw. The king turned to her. "They will come for you again." "I know," she said. His voice lowered. "Then you must choose." The bond pulsed, desperate. The heir watched her, not pleading, not demanding. She drew a steady breath. "I already have," she said. And somewhere deep within the court, the first true betrayal settled its roots. The sun had barely risen, and yet the stronghold felt fractured. Messages arrived like arrows, quick, pointed, carrying rumor and subtle threats. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors. Alliances shifted like sand beneath a storm, and the bond throbbed violently, as if it too sensed the fractures spreading. The heir stood beside her at the window, silent, body tense, eyes scanning the courtyard below where a contingent of loyal guards prepared for an unknown confrontation. "They will test you again today," he said quietly. "I am ready." she replied. The bond flared at her words, not in fear, not in anger, but in desperate agreement. It pulled tight, demanding attention, as though aware that each step forward could unravel what had been so painfully built. A horn sounded, the signal for assembly. She squared her shoulders. Then let them come. The council chamber was charged the moment she entered. Eyes flicked to her, some filled with envy, some with calculation, and others with raw curiosity. The Alpha King remained seated, expression unreadable, yet she could feel the tension rolling off him in waves. A young advisor stepped forward. "My lady, there are reports disorder at the Eastern Barracks. Soldiers refuse orders. Some have gone rogue." Her pulse quickened. "Who commands them?" "Captain Levin," he said. Aligned with Lady Meredith, the bond pulsed sharply, warning her. Danger approached. The king's voice cut through the chamber. "Levin is loyal to the realm, not whispers." She met his gaze steadily. "And yet he defies command. That is the consequence of silence and fear." He exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. "Then you will act." "I will act," she said. "But not alone." The heir stepped closer, voice low, almost intimate. "I will be at your side. Always." The council murmured at the defiance, but she ignored them. Eyes locked on the doors where the first stirrings of confrontation had already begun. Sparks of movement, the subtle shuffling of armor, the whispers of betrayal, were enough to set her blood racing. "Tell me," she said, turning to the king, "who among them will fight for the realm and who will fight for fear?" He paused. Then, with a hint of pride she had not expected, he replied, "Those who remain silent now will reveal themselves in time." Outside, the air shifted. The first of the rogue soldiers entered the courtyard, their presence bold, eyes bright with reckless obedience. She felt the bond pulse urgent, demanding, protective. It wrapped around her heart and lungs, syncing with her own rhythm, reminding her that survival was no longer just her choice, it was their collective will. "Then let the reckoning begin," she whispered. The heir's eyes flared with silent agreement. "And we will not fail." The Alpha King's gaze softened briefly as he observed them, understanding at last that this was no longer a game of power alone. It was the forging of forces older than crown or court. The chamber emptied, and the stronghold became a battlefield of whispers and intentions. Every footstep, every glance, every word now carried weight. Outside, the rogue soldiers halted, sensing the charge in the air. She stepped forward, and with each stride, the fractures in stone and blood widened, threatening to reshape the kingdom itself. The courtyard trembled under tension. Rogue soldiers lined the stone path, armor glinting in the pale morning sun. Their leader, Captain Levin, stepped forward, eyes flickering with ambition and defiance. She advanced without hesitation, the bond tightening, pulsing like a drum in her chest, warning her of the danger and bolstering her resolve. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. The air mirrored her, silent but present, a constant reassurance that she was not alone. Levin's gaze fell on her. "You dare come forward." "I do not cower," she said, voice steady and firm. "Nor will I beg for peace." The soldiers murmured, unease rippling through the ranks. Whispers of loyalty collided with fear, creating a tension that threatened to snap. Levin sneered. "Then you force our hand." The air stepped forward, power radiating like a contained storm. The bond resonated with him, vibrant, protective, demanding recognition. Even the rogue soldiers hesitated, sensing the ancient force pulsing between them. "You will stand down," the heir said quietly. Yet every word carried weight that was nearly physical. Levin laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "And if we do not?" Her voice cut through the tension. Then you will answer to all of us. The Alpha King emerged from the chamber steps, presence commanding. Enough. His voice rolled like thunder, silencing whispers and halting movement. This rebellion is not for you to decide. Stand down or face consequences beyond your reckoning. Some soldiers shifted nervously, doubt creeping in, but Levin's pride anchored him. We will not obey a woman who holds nothing but rumors and whispers. Her gaze met his, unflinching. I am more than rumors, and I am no longer silent. The bond flared around her, the air thickening, electric. Even the king felt it, a reminder that her presence alone carried power. Levin's stance faltered. He glanced at the heir, who remained steady, unyielding. The heir's aura silent, potent was a warning. The soldiers' whispers turned to doubt, murmurs of allegiance wavering. Some dropped their weapons slightly, uncertainty breaking through the rigid line of defiance. The king stepped forward, hand raised, calming but fierce. Your loyalty is to the realm, not your fear. Choose wisely. A tense silence hung. The rogue soldiers shifted again, unease growing as the bond, the air, and the queen's own presence created a force they could not ignore. Finally, Levin's eyes flickered with hesitation. Pride and fear warred in his expression. Leave, she said, voice low but commanding, and carry the truth of this day with you. Do not return without allegiance to the realm. Levin's face paled. He dropped his gaze and motioned for his soldiers to follow. Slowly, one by one, they backed away, leaving the courtyard tense but controlled. The heir exhaled quietly, sidestepping to stand beside her. It could have gone differently, he murmured. She looked at him, heart still pounding. It could have, but it didn't. The Alpha King observed silently, a mixture of awe and caution in his eyes. You are formidable, he said. She met his gaze. I learned from watching you, and surviving without you. The bond pulsed one last time, calming slightly, as if acknowledging the victory. Yet the warning remained, it was not over. The fractures in loyalty, in power, were still there, subtle and sharp. She turned from the courtyard, knowing this day was only the beginning. And in the distance, whispers of dissent already gathered like shadows at the edge of dawn. The halls of the stronghold were quiet, but the air was heavy with plotting. Every step she took resonated through marble floors and whispered secrets down corridors lined with portraits of past rulers. The bond pulsed faintly, aware of the ripples of tension, of eyes watching and listening, of power measured in footsteps and whispered breaths. The air followed, silent, like a shadow tethered to her presence, watching every doorway, every flicker of movement. He did not speak, but the intensity in his gaze was a constant, an unyielding reminder that she was no longer alone. She entered the council chambers once more, where the remaining nobles gathered. They had recovered from the morning's events, but unease lingered in their eyes, in the careful alignment of their bodies and the subtle, almost imperceptible hisses of conversation between them. My lady, an elder began, voice smooth yet edged with caution. Your influence is ... remarkable. But there are those who would not yield so easily. She lifted a hand, silencing them before the words could take root. I am aware. The heir leaned slightly closer, voice low. They will test you again, in ways you cannot predict. I expect nothing less, she replied, feeling the bond tighten around her, a warning and a comfort. The Alpha King arrived silently, observing her with eyes that measured, weighed, and considered. Your presence changes the dynamics here, he said quietly. Perhaps it should, she replied. The council murmured, but she ignored them, focusing on the game at hand. Whispers of alliances, suspicions, and loyalties formed invisible threads across the room. Some sought to entangle her, others to probe for weakness, but she moved carefully, the bond guiding her, the heir standing at her side, a silent pillar of restraint and strength. "Lady Mareth," she said, voice calm but sharp, "your maneuvers are noted. Your attempts to sway loyalty through fear and favor will not succeed." A hush fell. Even the heir's presence, a constant undercurrent, could not mask the impact of her words. Mareth's lips twitched. "Bold," she murmured. "I have learned to survive," she said, "without your whispers shaping my choices." The bond pulsed with satisfaction, acknowledging her strength, but also tension. The court was far from tamed. It waited, always waiting, for a misstep, for hesitation. The Alpha King exhaled slowly. "You are formidable," he admitted, tone carrying a mixture of pride and apprehension. She nodded once, eyes sweeping the chamber. "And I will not be underestimated again." The heir's gaze met hers, silent understanding passing between them. They both knew the trials were far from over. And yet the first threads of strategy, patience, and unwavering will were being woven, tighter and stronger with every careful step. Outside the chamber, shadows shifted. Courtiers whispered to each other, and the distant echo of unrest reminded them all that power, like the bond, was never still. It moved, pulsed, and demanded respect. The stronghold had never felt smaller. Hallways twisted like serpents, every corner hiding whispers, every flicker of torchlight a reminder of unseen eyes. She moved with deliberate care, the air close, their steps echoing softly, a rhythm of defiance and anticipation. A sudden clamor reached them from the western corridor. Guards surge, their voices a mixture of alarm and uncertainty. The bond reacted instantly, pulsing violently, warning her of the threat approaching faster than her eyes could follow. "Stay behind me," the heir whispered. "I don't," she replied, stepping forward. "I face what comes." A figure emerged, masked, swift, dagger glinting. A strike meant to wound, to intimidate. The heir intercepted with fluid precision, the bond flaring between them, protective and reactive, yet something deeper stirred beneath its surface. A warning, a question of allegiance. The masked figure retreated, vanishing into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. Breath heavy, she turned to the heir. "They are escalating. They fear what they cannot control," he replied, eyes scanning the darkness. "And you are no longer controllable." The Alpha King arrived moments later, presence commanding, eyes dark with restrained anger. "Who dares?" "She was targeted," the heir said, voice low but firm. "This is no random act." The king's gaze flicked between them. "A warning, or an attempt," she added, voice steady, "to claim the narrative before the truth is known." The bond pulsed in agreement, tightening like a tether around her heart. The heir's proximity amplified the pulse, an intertwining of protection, loyalty, and unspoken emotion. "You are testing them," the king said quietly, almost a warning. "And they will respond with force." "I am not testing them," she said. "I am standing." The heir's hand brushed hers, subtle but charged. The contact was a silent declaration, a tether in the storm. "And I will stand with you," he murmured. Outside, shadows stirred, courtiers whispered, and the first threads of rebellion wove themselves into a tapestry of challenge and consequence. She met the king's gaze, steady, unwavering. "Let them come. We are ready." The bond pulsed fiercely, warning of battles yet unseen, promising vigilance, and affirming the truth she had claimed for herself, that she would no longer be silenced. no longer hidden, no longer diminished. And somewhere in the darkness, those who plotted felt the first stirrings of doubt because she had become the force they could neither predict nor control. The stronghold vibrated with tension that could be felt in every stone. The corridors were alive with movement, whispers, and the faint hum of the bond that wrapped itself around her like an invisible shield. Every sense was heightened, every shadow a possible threat, every glance a message. The heir remained at her side, a constant presence of protection and restraint. They moved together as if their steps were one, synchronized by the bond that pulsed between them. The council had gathered. The remaining loyalists aligned, while those who had wavered now waited to see the outcome. The Alpha King observed from the steps, his expression a mixture of pride, caution, and unspoken worry. The masked assailants from before returned, more numerous, emboldened. They struck with precision, aiming to destabilize, to send a message. But she did not flinch. The heir intercepted, the bond flaring between them. A living force that protected and warned, guided and restrained. She drew her own strength from it, moving with a clarity born from survival, defiance, and the fire that had always burned within. The first confrontation ended quickly, the rogue soldiers scattering, their attempt failing against unity, strategy, and the combined force of will she shared with the heir. Breath heavy, she met the Alpha King's gaze. "This ends with a choice," she said, voice steady, resonant with authority. "And what is that choice?" he asked, every word measured. "To stand as I am," she replied, "with loyalty, with love if it is offered, with truth always. No chains, no manipulations, only what is earned and given freely." The heir's hand brushed hers again, a subtle but charged contact. "And I choose to be by your side," he said, low and unwavering. The king nodded, the weight of understanding settling in his eyes. "Then it is done," he said quietly, almost reverently. The council, the remaining courtiers, the stronghold itself seemed to exhale, acknowledging the shift, the new order, the power that was neither imposed nor taken, but claimed. She stood tall, heart pounding, bond pulsing, aware of the dangers still lying in shadow, the whispers waiting to rise again, but ready. She had chosen herself, her truth, and those who had earned her trust. The heir looked at her, eyes bright with restrained emotion. "We have weathered much," he said. "Yes," she replied, "and yet the dawn is ours." Outside, the first light of morning crept over the stronghold, illuminating stone, shadow, and the faces of those who had survived the night of power, intrigue, and desire. The kingdom had shifted, and she had claimed her place, not by submission, not by demand, but by the quiet, unyielding strength that had carried her through every test. The bond pulsed once, deeply, fully, as if acknowledging the completion of one cycle and the promise of another. Loyalty, power, love, and freedom intertwined, fragile yet indestructible. She exhaled, letting the tension release in a slow, measured breath. The stronghold was quiet, but alive, as she and the heir walked forward into the dawn. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.